go ahead and get started. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you, depending on the time zone that you have zoomed in and connected with us today. We're so glad that you're here. Welcome to the College Essay Writing Tips virtual program here hosted by Hamilton College. We are so excited to get to share some information with all of you about writing college application essays. The chat is enabled, so it'd be great if you all feel comfortable introducing yourselves in the chat, letting us know who you are and also where you're zooming in from. It's always exciting to get to connect with people from around the world. So go ahead and introduce yourselves in the chat. We'll go ahead and get started with our own introductions. I'm Niki Barron. I am a Hamilton College alum, and I'm also an Associate Dean of Admission, and this is my 24th year in the admission profession, so I've been reading college essays for 23 years.
Hi, everyone. Well, I'm just watching all of the people saying hello. We've got Puerto Rico, Maryland. I saw Jacob from, I think, New York City, maybe Texas. Anyway, my name is Jacob Browne. I am the Executive Director of Admission here at Hamilton College. I started at Hamilton in October, but I've been in the admission profession since graduating from my own alma mater in 2005. So 20 years of reading college admission essays. And thanks for joining us during the summer. I hope we're able to answer some questions for you and also make it enjoyable as well as informative.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Isabel Caprood. I'm an Assistant Dean of Admission here at Hamilton, and I've been reading college application essays for 3 years, so this will be my 4th year.
We also want to introduce one of our colleagues who's currently behind the scenes this evening, or evening for us here in New York. But behind the scenes for us is Rachel Clary. Rachel is a Senior Assistant Dean of Admission. Rachel is not on screen, so you're not able to see her today. However, she is behind the scenes and she's monitoring all the questions that might come in the Zoom webinar's Q&A. So the chat is enabled. It's so exciting to get to meet all of you. Thank you for introducing yourselves. It's so great to see that we truly are connecting with people from around the world today. So thank you for that. But any questions that you hope to be addressed during the program, please direct those specifically into the Q&A because our colleague Rachel will be behind the scenes monitoring the Zoom webinar Q&A. So we're here today to talk about college application essays. We're really excited to get to share from our own experience reviewing essays from over the years. We'll answer some of your common questions about college application essays. We're also going to give you our advice, but please remember that our advice is simply our advice. And reviewing college essays is a subjective process, but we do have some tips and suggestions for you all to keep in mind as you're working on drafting your essays. There are many right ways to craft an essay. What we're going to give you some ideas to hopefully help you start the brainstorming process and some things to think about as we then review them on our end of things. But just remember that we know that all of you here today have a great essay in you. This is a very human process. We know that a human has written the essay, and just know that all of us on the Zoom webinar today, in addition to some of our other colleagues who are not here joining us today, we all read the essays that are all submitted. So it is a very human process, and we are really excited to really get to know you through your application essay. So just a little bit of a roadmap of what to expect during this virtual program. We're going to start off by talking a little bit about how the application essay fits in with the overall application, some things that we look for as we review these essays. We're going to talk about some ideas that we have to share about how to pick a topic to write about as you're thinking about drafting your essay, how to make your essay stand out. We have some tips to share about that. We also have chosen some good essay examples that we have read over the years that we'd like to share with you. And then we'll wrap things up by bringing it all together by sharing some do's and don'ts in the essay process. So how does the essay fit into the overall application? How do we use the essay as we are reviewing applications for admission? We're referring here to the essay that is part of the Common Application or the Coalition Application or the Pressbridge Application, which are the 3 application forms that we accept here at Hamilton. The personal essay is really a chance for you to demonstrate something that's important to you. It should be a self-reflective piece of writing. It should be insightful. It's your opportunity to essentially convey your voice directly to the admission committee and to your application readers. We're really excited about hearing your story, some things that are important to you, experiences that you've had, interests that you have, goals that you have, relationships that have been important to you. The essay can really take on any number of different directions. And if you actually look at all the possible essay prompts in the application, you'll see that they're pretty open-ended. And you can really take the essay in any direction that you feel will let us hear your voice and hear things that are important to you. The essay is also a place to write things in the application. So remember that we are not mind readers. We don't know. We're really excited to get to know you, but we don't know necessarily what your experiences have been before we open the application file. So if you want us to know some things that have been important to you, you're going to need to describe them to us in your application, and the essay is a great place to do that. But you can also use the additional information section of the application, and all of the application forms do have this opportunity for you to highlight things that you think we should know about, but don't necessarily fit in with the essay. Maybe they don't fit with the topic of what you've chosen to address. But you would like the admission committee to take these experiences into consideration as we're reviewing your application. You could definitely use the additional information section to highlight those. Also, you can email information that you'd like us to know specifically to the college so that we're aware of that as well if you're not able to find other places in your application where it fits. Remember that the context matters. So this is one part of the entire application file. We can never pinpoint any of our admission decisions on one specific part of your application, such as your application essay or any other part of your application. Your essay is one component of everything else that we consider in our application review process. So the essay does matter. We are really excited to get to know you through the essay, but all the other parts of your application are also considered and are also reviewed as we're making our admission decisions. Also, as I said earlier, a human reviews these application essays. This is a very personalized process where we really are excited to get to know our applicants, and the essay is one way that we get to know you on a more personal and deeper level. So I'm actually going to turn it over to Jake now, and Jake is going to talk specifically about what we look for in an essay.
Yeah, thanks so much, Niki. I think those were really, really great points. And there are a few pieces that we're looking for in that essay. Of most importance is really to get to have a better understanding of you. So I like to say that, the essay allows two things for us to evaluate. What's important to you? What would you like to share with us? And also, we are looking at the quality of the writing, right? Are you able to communicate in a clear way a certain narrative? Now, that does not mean that you have to be the perfect writer. We expect that you are 17, 18-year-old high school students or students who are bound to go to college. And so you should be writing like a 17 or 18-year-old would. I think one of the reasons you go to college, and particularly as is the case for Hamilton, is to become a better communicator, right? College is to allow you to express yourself, to do it in a meaningful and impactful way. So that's what we expect when we get here. When you get here, we don't want you to have the picture perfect essay. So don't worry so much that it has to be so tightly polished and so wonderful. We're really trying to get a sense of who you are. And through that, it's understanding your voice. And so I can't stress that enough, that your voice should come through in your college essay. I'll say two other things, and then we'll also talk about maybe some people who are tempted to not use their voice. But I always like to say two different things about college essays. First, you're writing the script to a commercial, not the screenplay to a huge epic movie, right? And so it's not the idea that you have to take us from the day you were born, 17, 18 years until today. In fact, it's quite the opposite. We want something that is really, really important to you. And that's sort of the second piece that I think is important in a college essay. As my colleague Niki mentioned, lots of different prompts. The Common App has prompts, the Coalition apps have prompts. You'll see different prompts maybe on separate applications. And even the Common App has a prompt of like, choose something of your choice, right? The most important thing that I think, or the piece that makes for a really compelling essay is to show impact. And so that's what I want you to think of as you're developing and as you're writing this essay is, what is this impact? What has this experience had? What type of impact has it had on me? What type of impact have I had on whatever it is I'm writing about? So sure, but also impact. Now, let's talk a little bit about the use of your voice. I think AI, artificial intelligence, chat GPT, right? We're not here to say don't ever use it. It's completely 100% bad. I think there are uses for it, and we certainly understand that in the admission process and the application review process. But I will tell you that actually AI is not useful for the exercise of writing the college essay. Because what is most important, as I've said, is really for you to share with us your voice. And there's really only one person that can do that. A computer, a chatbot, ChatGPT, they cannot serve as a proxy for your voice, right? And that's just the same as when you're writing the essay and you want it read by some people who support you, which I think is a great idea. But if all of a sudden your friend, your English teacher, your parents, someone else that you really admire and trust starts to edit it and overly edit it, and it loses your voice, then that's also actually not part of the assignment, right? We're not looking for a really, buttoned up research paper. We're really looking to hear and learn more about you. So you may be tempted to go into ChatGPT and start, hey, give me a really good essay, and I'm, a high school senior and I'm applying to Hamilton College, right? That's not the point of this exercise. The point of this exercise is for us to hear from you, to learn more about you, and also to get a sense of who you are as a person who is potentially going to join our community. So I talked a little bit about voice and talked a little bit about what we're looking for. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague, Isabel, who's going to also talk about one of those really, really important aspects of writing the essay, choosing a topic.
Yeah, thank you, Jake. I know that Niki and Jake just talked about some really important aspects of your college essay, but I think one thing that is really important is the topic that you're going to write on. And I think, all of you have a lot of really unique and important things that make you you. And so it can be really difficult to choose just one topic that you want to be part of your college essay. And we really want to use this as a way to get to know you. So you can be personal when you're choosing your essay topic, but we want you to remember to be appropriate. You're writing to a stranger in a professional environment. In some cases, this might be one of our first impressions of you. So you want to keep that in mind when you're writing your essay and thinking about what it is that you want us, and you want admission officers who are really strangers to you to be able to learn from that and get to know about you. But we also want you to think about maybe writing about something that's unique to you, something that's going to actually help us get to know you, and not just get to know somebody who seems like you, who might be like you. We want to know who you are and not just someone who has your general interests or who goes to your school, or anything like that. We really want to get to know who you are, not only as an applicant, but as a potential member of our community. So really take this as a chance for us to learn something new about you. You also might have the opportunity in your essay to be writing about something that we won't be able to get from another part of your application. So if there's another space in your application to be talking about those things, you might want to take advantage of that in that space and use your essay as a way for us to learn something completely new or completely different that we're not going to be able to see in those other spaces. And when you're picking a topic, a lot of times the hardest time to pick that topic is when you sit down at the computer to start writing. You're looking at all of the prompts, you're trying to figure out what is the most important thing that I want to write about here that I can do justice to in 650 words. And suddenly the list seems really, really big of all the things that you could write about. And one of the best ways to kind of help make that list a little bit smaller, a little bit more manageable is actually to make a physical list. maybe start it right on your phone. I'm sure that a lot of you, I know I have my phone with me almost all of the time. So when you're experiencing those funny moments, those things that are important to you, maybe you're out with your family and something happens that you say, oh, I love this tradition that we have. Make a list of those things. And then when you're able to sit down to start writing your essay, you can say, okay, here are these list of 10 things that I have always loved. What do I think that I can do the most justice to in this essay? And that's usually a better starting point than sitting down and thinking about your entire life up to this point. Another thing that might help you in terms of writing your essay and picking a topic is actually reading more. We know that people who read more are generally better writers. You've gotten different perspectives on writing, you know what you like, and you know what sounds good to you. So if you're looking for that inspiration, sometimes the best way is to read something written by somebody else and get that inspiration. So check out a book at your local library or pick up one of your old favorites and kind of think about what it is that inspires you when you're reading. And that's another really great way to kind of inspire yourself and try to think about what is it that makes me me. And I know I've just said a lot of things about different topics that you can choose, but there are no singularly good or bad topics. It's all about the way that you write. And you write about the topic that you've chosen. There's no one thing that's a really good thing to write about and one thing that's a bad thing to write about. Some examples that I can think of, a lot of students think that with this college essay, they need to kind of shock admission officers. They need to tell us something that is shocking, that kind of helps us to learn something. Maybe they've had a challenge in their life and they're writing about adversity. And one of the things about writing about adversity, it certainly gives us some insight into what's happened in your life, into who you are. But with only 650 words, sometimes it's really difficult in order to write about this and do justice to it. When you're writing this essay, we want to be able to see some growth that you've gone through in your life. And with that word limit, sometimes you can write 650 words about that story, but it's difficult to show the growth. And so you're not able to do justice to your story and to what we're looking for at the same time. And if that's the case, that might not be the best topic to write about for this specific assignment. We really want to see that growth. So it's really okay at that point to say, you know what, this isn't what's going to be best for me. There's other places in my application that I can show this, and I'm going to choose something else. Another topic that people write about a lot is activities that they're involved in. And sometimes we get that a lot and they kind of blend together. But sometimes students write about activities they're involved in and they do it in a way that really stands out. I read an essay this past year about a student who had a love of hiking. And they framed it around the one time that they were hiking and they saw bears and they were out with their family. But they talked about some subsequent hikes that they went on, ways that they were able to grow, overcome those fears, bring new people on those hikes, and really showcase some leadership skills and other skills that they had learned, which I thought was really great. And it showed understanding of others and their surroundings and the growth that they went through, even in a topic that we see coming from a lot of students with a similar interest. And with that, I'm going to hand it back over to Niki to talk a little bit more about maybe some ways to make your essay stand out and be more authentic to you.
Isabel. So a really common question that we sometimes get is, how do I make my application stand out? Specifically, how do I make my essay stand out? Yes, it's true. We read thousands of essays every year. But the way that essays and applications in general stand out to us are when we are really getting to know the student. And so the advice that we have to share with you is that the way to make your application and the way to make your essay stand out to us is simply be who you are. I know that this is sometimes a little bit of a scary process because this is maybe one of the first times in your experience when you've ever been asked to do a lot of self-discovery and think about who you are and then convey that in writing in your college application. But being who you are and letting us get to know you is how your application is going to stand out to us. So don't think about what you think we want to see or what we're looking for. Don't be too gimmicky or try too hard to make your essay stand out. Simply be authentic to who you are. Sometimes students will ask, well, do I need to make my essay funny? I would say if you are a funny person, if you have a sense of humor, go ahead and put that sense of humor in your essay. But I would say that your essay probably is not the first time that you should be trying to be funny. Again, it's be who you are. If you are genuinely a funny person with a great sense of humor, if that's how you're known in your school community, feel free to include that in your essay. But again, your essay is not the time to try to be funny for the first time. Clean and simple writing is better than trying too hard. Sometimes this will come more with refining and editing, but as Jake said a little while ago, we know what a teenage voice sounds like. And so we want to hear your voice come through. So just keep your writing simple. Let us get to easily understand and follow all the experiences that you're trying to describe in your application essay. Sometimes twists can sometimes be an interesting technique to use in your application essay. Maybe you want to take your essay in a certain direction, but you started in a completely different way. Sometimes that sort of catches us off guard and makes us think, oh, wow, look, this is something that we didn't expect in this essay. Likewise, a good opening can certainly sometimes hook your reader. You've probably learned a little bit about this from writing exercises that you've done in your school assignments, where you want to think about some interesting ways to open up your writing. Good opening sentences can sometimes be a way to hook in your reader. Also, specific moments in time are generally more effective essays than trying to capture in 650 words your entire autobiography. Or sometimes students will write about experiences that happened a really long time ago, like maybe you're going to talk about a kindergarten experience. But as Isabel just described, we want to hear about the growth process. And sometimes you're talking so much about that kindergarten experience that you're not also taking the time to reflect on how that has shaped your perspective and who you are today. We know that a lot of growth has happened since you were in kindergarten, and you are applying to college at this moment in time as a 12th grader for our first year class. And we want to get to know who you are right now as a 12th grader. So being as specific as you can with specific experiences generally are the essays that are more effective for us. I'm going to turn it back over to Jake now, and Jake and Isabel are about to describe some specific essays and give you some specific examples of sentences that have worked over the years.
Yeah, those are all really, really good points, Niki. And I can't sort of stress enough. It's a lot about that less is more, right? We don't need to know the whole thing or a whole autobiography. It's really trying to boil it down. Again, like I said before, sort of what is that impact, right? And so we get a number of essays that might be about a student who is going on a mission trip. And maybe the student is sort of taking us through and they've never been on an airplane before and they're sitting at the gate and they're nervous and excited and anxious. And then they get on the plane and the plane gets there and then they land and then they have to go and do this project. It's long, right? And it's sort of where are we going and when are we getting there? Whereas perhaps if this sounds something like an experience that you've had, what was that one element of the trip, of providing the service or going on this mission experience that really stuck with you for the following weeks, months, or years, right? It's probably not the whole thing about how you got to the airport, you were sitting at the gate and you never flew before, but maybe it's something that has really stayed with you and has had a lasting impact on you. And I think that's always really the heart of the essay. So Niki mentioned a little bit about hooks, and I think hooks are great ways for you to capture the reader, right? I also think that hooks are really hard to write, particularly as you're staring at your Google Doc or you're staring at Microsoft Word, or maybe you're starting with a pen and paper and you're like, okay, I got to make a hook. How do I do this, right? So hooks a good hook doesn't necessarily mean that you write it at the very beginning. Just start writing that essay, and maybe the hook will come naturally to you. Or maybe you'll go back and be like, oh, this is how I want to start it off. Sometimes I've even had essays where I've written them, and the end actually becomes the better beginning, right? And that wasn't my plan, but I think what you just need to do is start writing it. And maybe the first thing that you don't want to think about is, okay, how do I start this with a really, really good hook? With all that said, hooks want to sort of get the reader's attention. We're reading a lot of applications. There's a lot of ways that folks and different Colleges and universities will read applications, right? And so you sort of want to get our attention pretty quickly. One of my favorite hooks that I still use in a lot of my essay writing workshops as a good example, great example, really. I think the essay started with like, I have a complicated relationship with mucus. Whoa, okay, kind of gross. But really then the essay went to talk about how she discovered all these snails in her backyard and thought snails were disgusting, and then learned about like micro photography and started to really develop this love of the thing that she really, really hated as a kid, right? And that showed a little bit of impact. But I have a complicated relationship with mucus. That's kind of a hook. I want to read more, I think. Maybe another hook that we've seen is, I've had a student, I'm just going to read this off here. It's 6:52 a.m. on a frosted over Friday in September, and my dad and I are running late as we wind down our steep hill to school. It's pretty specific, right? 6:52 a.m. It's a frosted over. I can also picture that September, the time where sort of the frost is right on the grass. It's not terribly cold yet. Are you late? What's 6:52 have in relationship to anything? So I think it's also being really, really specific in that hook. But those are some of like the different, I guess you could say, tools to use to make for a really, really good essay. The other thing that I will just sort of point out, and I think my colleagues will talk about this as well, it's much better to show us than to tell us. So show us that experience. Show us how there's a certain piece that's really important to you, rather than just being like, yeah, I love music, right? Isabel, what else do you have to help some of our future essay writers craft a really good essay?
Yeah. Another example of a opening sentence that I thought was really nice was, when I was still small enough to fit in the sun-drenched space between the armoire and the couch, I sat cross-legged and spun the world. And I really love that because, like, when I read that, I do kind of picture myself being small and like sitting in my living room. And just kind of, I think that being that small, you're fitting in that small space, but the sun is out. I just feel like it feels really warm there. And spinning the world, like you think of a globe. But I think it's just such a great way to describe it and to think about, like, when you're that little, that really is what a globe is to you. And like you kind of think, where's the essay going from here? Because from that first sentence, you don't know what's going to happen, but you're really interested in figuring out, why this student was sitting in such a small space and what they're doing with that globe. And so I think it's a really interesting way to pull you in, but still leave you questioning and wanting to know what comes next.
So, Jake and Isabel, I'm wondering if you can think back over the years that you've been reading essays, and if you can think of maybe one or two examples of essays that over the years have stood out to you. I know, Isabel, you already mentioned one that you read about hiking and seeing bears. But as you're thinking about examples, I think I'll share my own over the years that have stood out. I once read an essay that was so descriptive that I really got a sense of the student, and the student's topic was about her commute to school. Now, you would think that commuting to school is an everyday experience. It's probably true. It is a fairly ordinary topic, but I find that sometimes the more ordinary topics are actually often the essays that are the most effective in being self-reflective and insightful and giving me such a sense of the student. But in this particular essay, the student wrote about her walking commute to school. And she described how she walks to school every day. And she described the community and the neighborhood where she grew up, and talks about what she thinks about. And she wrote about what she thinks about as she walks to school every day. And then she talked about how her walk to school differs from her walk home from school, and how her thought process changes later in the day after she's had a day at school. And so I got such a sense in that essay of how the student thinks. I learned about the things that are important to her. I learned about her neighborhood where she grew up. And it was such an insightful essay that I still think of this essay as one of my favorites that I've read. Another great essay that I read over the years, I specifically remember, was about a student's nightly experience of having family dinners. And this student was the youngest sibling of 4 in his family. And he talked about how every night his family would come together for dinner. And when he was younger, he didn't feel like he could contribute to the family conversations very much around the dinner table because his older siblings were always talking about things that he just really couldn't follow or understand. And he talked about how, as his older siblings went off to college, his relationship changed with the dinner table and how the conversations changed. And as he matured, he was then able to contribute more to these family dinner conversations. And then he brought it all together by talking about how it's really different in his senior year as the only sibling who's left at the dinner table, talking specifically with his parents every night for these family dinners. So again, this was a really insightful essay. I learned a lot about the student's family structure. I learned about this nightly experience that he has with his families, how he's matured over the years, what he thinks about, what's important to him. Those are just a couple of examples. Again, family dinners are a fairly ordinary topic. Walking to school and home from school is a fairly ordinary topic for an essay. But both of these essays were so descriptive that I knew that only these students could write these essays in this way, that I really got a sense of their voice. Jake, do you have any similar examples of essays that you remember over the years that have stood out to you?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think the snails and the complicated relationship with mucus is pretty memorable. But I also wanted to sort of piggyback a little bit on what you were saying, Nikki, and sort of this descriptive voice. And one of the things that I think is also important is that you're descriptive, but it doesn't look like you've cracked open the thesaurus and you're like, let me choose this word, or let me, get these other, words that are like 5 syllables long, because push comes to shove, most of us, have a pretty common reading knowledge. And sometimes it's the words that we use in our everyday vernacular. They're just as good as sort of the really particular or different types of words, particularly if that's not your voice, right? So when we're talking about descriptive, it doesn't mean that you have to, sit next to the thesaurus or go on, there's probably like thesaurus.com, and be like, okay, I'm going to use this word because that's not part of your regular voice. One of the other essays that I kind of like essays that talk about a student's sometimes like summer job or high school job, because they tend to be kind of like mundane things, but they can also be really, really interesting. And so one of the students whose essay I read, she wanted to talk about her job at a movie theater. And this student also was really into movies, was thinking about going to film school. And it was one of those movie theaters that you might have in your neighborhood that's not like the glitziest, megaplex, IMAX. It was sort of like that neighborhood, like movie theater where you can kind of smell like stale popcorn still, and maybe the floor is just a little bit sticky. But it was being able to have that descriptive piece as she took us through the movie theater in a way that also it wasn't written like a script, like a screenplay, but it sort of had that feel of like walking us through. We were passing by different theaters or different movie posters, and it was talking about some of the experiences she has had at the movies, first going to the movies as a young kid, as often we do with family members, and then ultimately working at a movie theater, and then thinking about having a career and going to film school, and just her love and fascination for film and movies. Again, has the essay probably been written before? Probably. Like, movies are a common, language among all of us, but it was her voice and the way she wrote it and her use of descriptive language where I just felt like I was right next to her. And that makes for a really, really powerful essay.
Yeah, and I've read some really great essays, and I think, I shared the one about the student who was hiking, but another one that kind of sticks in my mind is a student who wrote about discomfort. And they spoke about how all of their friends didn't like that this student would only drive with the windows down. They didn't use the air conditioning. And they really framed it around the way that they were able to grow from the discomfort and that not everything has to be comfortable. They spoke about their house doesn't have air conditioning and why waste all these beautiful days with the windows up, but they also spoke about the ways that they were able to push themselves in the sport that they did, and pushing themselves in the classroom. And I think for part of it, like for me, was that it really resonated with me hearing this student talk about the ways that they experienced discomfort, but also the ways that they were pushing through them and the ways that they were able to reflect and say, here's how I've grown from that. But I just thought it was really interesting the way that they started the essay just by saying, like, when it's nice out, the windows are down in my car and my friends don't like it. And I really loved the way that, like, you could feel what they were talking about when they talked about challenging themselves in the classroom, challenging themselves when they were running. And so it just really felt really personal to that student and you got to know them, but it also felt like, oh, I kind of feel this way myself, which was really nice. Another one that I thought was really nice was a student who spoke about, they wrote about when they had studied abroad, they had done like a semester abroad in Spain. And they said, you know, the food was a lot heavier than they were used to, but at the end of every meal, they would have pomegranate seeds. And they went over to their host family's, their grandparents' house, where they saw a pomegranate for the first time. And they didn't realize the work that had gone into getting those pomegranate seeds and how much people were able to care about them. And they saw that and they kind of related that to some other things in their life where they said, here are these things behind the scenes that I didn't appreciate. And now that I see all of the work that's going into it, I realize how important those things are to me. And I realize these things that I do for other people that maybe people don't see. And that's part of what makes my life so great. And that's what makes it so important to have those people who care about you and who love you. And I thought it was just so, I think it was so descriptive to have brought it back to a different country and a different place. And then to say, and here's how my family and I love each other. And I thought that that was a really nice essay as well. But we also see some overused topics. You know, a lot of those topics that we just mentioned that were really great, they didn't sound like each other. Students were writing about things that were really unique. And it's okay to use a topic that other people are using. Like I mentioned before, it's the way that you write about it. But we do see a lot of essays coming in around topics like the activities that you do. If you're an athlete, we get a lot of essays about sports and the way that maybe you've grown through sports, but there's a lot of people who do sports. And if it's really important to you, it's okay to write about that. And we want to know that about you. But if there's other things you do, it's okay to write about those things as well. Another thing that we get a lot is an essay about somebody else, where you write about how important your grandmother is to you, and all the things that she's done. And while that's really awesome and that, you know, we love to get to know who she is, it doesn't help us get to know you, which is the point of your essay and the point of your college application is for us to get to know you. So writing maybe about an experience you had with your grandmother where you were able to, you know, learn something and take that into your life now might be a better way to frame that versus just writing about how awesome your grandma was and how influential she was on you. And another thing that we see is when students write about a list of objects or they try to put too many topics in an essay. You try to relate all of the shoes in your closet to different experiences in your life. And we don't ever get to learn a lot about each individual experience. It kind of becomes about the topics and about the objects you're writing about and not about you. We don't get that time to learn about you. We might learn that you have a lot of shoes, but we're not really learning who you are and who you've become. And that's really the point of your essay, and that's really what we want to get to know.
Great. We are going to move now into some do's and don'ts. So this is going to really bring together all these ideas that Jake, Isabel, and I have been talking about so far. So we're sort of going to synthesize them all together. And I am going to share my screen here. Just one moment. Hopefully you all can see this. So these are some do's and don'ts, and I think Jake is going to kick it off with the first do.
Yeah, write about your interests. If you're interested in it, it's going to come naturally to you and easier for you. So totally write about things you're interested in.
All right, and then don't try to be what you think we want. I mentioned before that we're kind of strangers to you, and that's okay. You don't have to know everything that I like in order to write an essay that I think is going to be really powerful. Just because I don't love football doesn't mean that a football essay can't be really great. So don't try to write your essay in order to please an admission officer, because at the end of the day, we want to get to know you. We don't want to get to know things that are like us. We want to get to know you. So don't try to write your essay in order to please somebody else, because in doing that, you're going to lose your voice and you're going to lose that essence of who you are.
Do be appropriate and remember your audience. Remember that you are writing a college application essay for admission as a first-year student to our college campus communities. We are reading your essays in a professional setting, so keep it appropriate. Make sure you're comfortable sharing what you're writing about, and we look forward to learning more about you. But just remember that the admission committee is your audience for your essays.
So here's a don't, and I think I've already mentioned this. Don't let it be over edited or lose your voice in the process. So I still use this way to sort of edit my own work before sending an email, or if I'm writing up something, I read it out loud, right? And so that's what I would also encourage you to do. Read that essay out loud. Do you stumble across some things? Are there some pieces that aren't flowing right? Does it not sound like you? That's a really great way to keep your voice in the process. Just don't let it be over edited. And I'm just going to put an asterisk. AI is not your friend in this exercise.
But what you should do is you should tell a story. We want to be able to follow your journey. We want to be able to read this and really understand what's happening. So give us a story of that moment in time that you're talking about.
Don't forget that this is a personal essay. So this is about you. It should be insightful, self-reflective. Let us get to know you better.
Okay. Do show us rather than tell us. So use anecdotes, use examples, use descriptions that make it more engaging, right? I always like to say to students as they're starting to think about the essay, show us that you're a good person. Don't just tell us that you're a good person. So if you believe that you're a good person and you're a great friend, in what ways have you been able to do that? So definitely show us, don't tell us.
And as Jake has said before, don't overuse a thesaurus or be too vague. When you start trying to overuse a thesaurus and throwing in all those really big words, a lot of times it doesn't sound how you would speak. If you were going to tell us that story, you wouldn't use those words. And so it doesn't really fit into the narrative of what you're writing. But if you're too vague, sometimes we don't understand what it is that you're writing about and what you're really trying to tell us and to show us through your essay. So we want you to write the way that you would normally write, the way you would normally speak, so that way you are the part of the essay that comes through and not just those fancy words. We want it to be about you.
Mm-hmm.
Do relate your essay to who you are now. Again, you are applying to college as a 12th grader, most likely, toward the end of your high school experience. So remember that you are applying and we would like to get to know you as an applicant at this moment in time. So remember that if you are going to describe some experiences or interests that you had a while ago, remember to relate them back to how they have shaped you and your perspective now as an applicant to the first year class in college.
Don't be afraid to start over. And that's two different ways. Don't be afraid to start the essay over. Be like, this isn't working. This isn't who it is. This isn't who I am. It's not coming out. And also maybe don't be afraid to just choose a different essay. I think that there's part of sort of revision. And sometimes you get to the point where you're like, this isn't the essay that I want to tell, or this is not the story that I want to share. So don't be afraid to start over. Just, okay, it's a new opportunity.
But when you're writing your essay, do proofread and proofread early and often and proofread out loud.
Mm.
If you start proofreading early, you'll be able to catch some of those early errors. It might help with your flow. And the more often you're doing that, the more often you're going to be hearing yourself, especially if you're saying it out loud. You're going to hear yourself saying those words and kind of catching yourself going, that doesn't flow well there. I should add this sentence up here. And when you hear yourself saying it, that's really when you're hearing your voice. But kind of saying it out loud, you're going to say, here's where the flow is, here's where it doesn't flow. Here are some things I can add and some things I can take away. And it's going to make that final proofread, that final editing process a little bit easier if you've been doing that from the beginning.
Don't procrastinate. Leave yourself plenty of time. It is so exciting that so many of you are here today, that you are already learning about the college application essay process. You are already ahead of the game. The application goes live in a couple of weeks, so you are already ahead of things. But we can tell when essays have been written at the last minute, within an hour of the application deadline, for example, versus essays that have really been written thoughtfully over a long period of time. So don't procrastinate, but I think it's great that you are all here today because you are already ahead of the game starting to think about your essays.
And the final do in this fantastic list of do's and don'ts, we're on your side. So do remember that. And we don't mean that only in the personal essay space. We are, hoping that you're successful. We are your champions. And you've also got a lot of champions out there who are rooting and cheering for you. So rely on those supporters and the people who are going to build you up. But remember, we're on your side. We want to learn about you and get to know you even better through this process.
So those were our do's and don'ts, but we also want to draw your attention to a couple of websites that you'll find on the Hamilton webpage. So one is, if you go to this website, and I'll leave this on your screen for a couple of moments here if you'd like to screenshot it or maybe write this down if you have a pen handy. But this website on the Hamilton College webpage is actually a site that we have created with all kinds of essay tips. So as you're moving forward in your drafting process, as you're building your essay, as you're drafting your essay, this website might be a helpful resource for you about some tips for writing a college application essay. I'll give it another moment or so on the screen. And the other essay that the other website that we wanted to draw your attention to that's on the Hamilton webpage, we actually have some sample essays. So we have gathered we've gathered permission from some of the currently enrolled Hamilton students to be able to publish their essays on our website. So if you'd like to actually read a full-length sample essay of essays that we thought were good representatives of essays that stood out to us, you'll actually find that here on this website, on the Hamilton College website. And I'll leave this up on your screen here for a moment as well, if you'd like to write this website down or maybe screenshot it.
I think also, Nikki, I don't know if you're able to do it, but someone asked if you could go to the final pros and cons slide. I don't know. Yeah, they were like, oh, someone asked. There you go. So if you just wanted our final pros, or not pros and cons, do's and don'ts, and you want to see that final time in case you wanted to screenshot it or you're thinking of something, there you go. Thanks, Nikki.
All right. Hopefully you all got this, but we also are recording it and we will post it on our website if you'd like to view the recording of this virtual program at a later date. But just, we also wanted to highlight another component to the written process of a college application that we haven't really talked about yet, and that is about supplemental essays. So what we've been focusing most of our time on so far today has really been the main essay. This is going to be the main part of what you're going to submit with the Common Application, the Coalition application, or the QuestBridge application, depending on which application form you're using. But in addition to that main essay that will go to the colleges that you're applying to based on that common form, that common application form that you're using, a lot of colleges and universities will have additional written statements that they are asking students to submit. These are referred to as supplemental essays, supplemental written statements that also are part of the college application process. So these are not necessarily personal essays. Every college or university that has a supplemental statement will have different prompts. They might have some similar themes, they might have some similar questions, but they are all specific to that college or university. And so you're going to need to make sure that you're keeping track of which of the colleges or universities that you're applying to also require or request these supplemental statements. But they're going to need a lot of thought as well. In addition to this main application essay that you're writing, you're also going to want to spend some time and some thought into how you respond to these supplemental essay questions. I think it's important to spend as much care and effort and thought on these supplemental statements as you are on your main essay. Also, pay attention to the prompt. Unfortunately, you're not going to be able to copy and paste the same response to every college supplemental essay that you are writing. So you're going to need to make them specific to that college or university that you're applying to. A very, I would say, common theme of what's asked for in these supplemental essays is trying to get a sense of what your interest is in that specific college or university. Again, you want to spend some time doing research so that you understand these different colleges and universities and what makes them distinct, so you can demonstrate that you've done research and that you are familiar with these different places. But make sure that if you're going to use the name of that college or university, that you're not copying and pasting the same response to each college supplemental essay, because sometimes we'll get these responses for our Hamilton application and they will contain the wrong name of a different college or university. Makes us want to forward those responses to our colleagues at these other institutions. So just make sure that you're making them specific to the college or university. Spend some time, spend some thought, thinking about how you want to respond to these questions. But again, you want to be yourself. So don't think about what we're trying to look for in these responses to these supplemental essays. Be yourself, let your own voice shine through, and that's how your application will stand out in general. So let's see, we've got a little bit of time if we've gotten any questions. I do see, it looks like we do have some questions. Again, many thanks to our colleague Rachel Clary, who's behind the scenes today, who's been helping us with the Q&A. But it looks like one question that has been posed for everyone is, when would you recommend having a strong draft or final product done for the college applications? Outside of the essay and my final SAT score, I have most of my application ready, but I'm struggling with the essay and I'm not sure if I'm behind.
You're not behind. No, like you're doing this, and I think this is a great way to learn more and become familiar. I mean, I think a good rule of thumb, maybe have the essay or a pretty strong final draft of the essay done before you go back to school. Because once you go back to school and there's practice and other things that are taking your attention, you're going to get busy. But I think, essays can still be written during the school year, but maybe use the summertime to get most of it done.
Great. And then it looks like another question we've gotten: what is a good time to submit your college application? Is submitting your application right when it goes live beneficial?
I don't know, Isabel, do you want to answer? I don't think so. I don't think if it goes live on August 1st, you don't have to submit on August 1st, right?
Yeah, I would say that the best time to submit your application is, of course, before the application deadline, but when you feel comfortable with it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're comfortable with it on August 1st and you know that you have put in as much as you can put into the application, into any written supplements or any parts of it, then that's a good time to submit it. And if that time looks like it's closer to the middle of November, or if you're applying early decision to a regular decision in January, those are also great times to submit it. You want to make sure that you have put in the time that you feel is necessary, and that things are looking how you want them to look, and that's a great time to hit send. I don't think that there's a beneficial, 2 weeks before the deadline or as soon as it opens. It's really up to you and when you are comfortable and you are ready.
I will say also that we're not the best people to ask when is a good time to submit your application. Obviously, we have deadlines, but this is where you should connect with your college counselor. They are your friends in that process. And so there are some college counselors that might say, I know Hamilton's deadline is this, but I need all of your stuff in by October 1st. Or you're ready to go on August 1st and you get everything submitted. Well, your college counselor may not be back at work and back at school until late August, early September, and that's when they're going to submit, the supplemental materials like your transcripts or recommendation letters. So ask your college counselor, through that process. But absolutely, the time not to submit your application is at like 11:59 and 59 seconds p.m. on the deadline.
To add that in our application review process, we don't take into consideration submission date. So in other words, it's not going to change how we view your application if you submit it on August 1st when it goes live versus if you submit it later on in the fall or the early part of the winter. We read all of our applications together as an applicant pool. And so just because you submit your application early, we're not actually going to read it until we are reading all the other applications in that particular round of admission decisions. And then we release all of our decisions all together as an applicant pool. So another question it looks like we've gotten is, if less is more in some senses, what is a good word count to reach?
Well, you definitely want to stick to the limit. So, Common App and even supplemental essays, there's a limit. You want to do that because in some of those, systems, it just cuts you off and you can't go beyond the limit. It also, if you want to stick to the limit, because that shows us that you can follow directions, right? And you want to stick to the prompt and what the directions are. Is it okay to go under the limit? If you've got your story and you've got your point across and you're still 100 words below the count, but you feel that that's your story, absolutely. We are not looking for you and the essay and your voice, and it must be that exact count. But I would say you want to stick to the limit, right?
Then it looks like we have time for one final question, which is Hamilton specific. So will Hamilton have supplemental questions this year?
Yes. all in unison, yes. We will have one supplemental question. So that will become available once the Common App, we hope to launch on August 1st. So stay tuned.
All right. Well, unfortunately, we have just about run out of time. So we just want to wrap things up here by saying thank you again to all of you for joining us today. It has been such a pleasure to get to connect with you from all over the world. So thank you for spending some of your morning, your afternoon, or your evening by thinking about your college application essays. We hope that the suggestions that we've just provided you are helpful. And if you'd like to go back and view this recording later, it will be posted on our website at a later date. But good luck to all of you as you're moving forward with your college search process. Good luck as you're writing and drafting and working on these great college application essays. But we know you all are going to do really well with your essays. But good luck, and it was so nice to see you all today. So thank you very much.
Bye-bye. Thanks.